All righty, everyone. It is 2 after. I know some people may still trickle in, but we've got a jam-packed schedule. So we're going to go ahead and get started. You are in the right place if you're looking for aligning guided pathways through equity and launching project teams. That's what we'll be talking about today and the efforts that we've been able to do at Norco College by really bringing the work of guided pathways and equity together and making them seamless, and but also being very intentional in our efforts. And so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So just quick introductions. I'm going to introduce myself. My counterpart will also. If you are comfortable getting on camera, I'd love to see more faces. Thank you for those who are on camera. But if you guys will just take a moment to introduce yourselves in the chat so we know who's in the room. If you want to put your name, title, college, anything you want to tell us about yourself, and maybe even why you picked this session, we'd love to hear from you. So feel free to do that while we take a little moment just to tell you a little bit about us. So my name is Tanisha James. I'm the Dean of Student Services at Norco College. I am one of the administrative leads for Guided Pathways and Equity. And I also have overseen and continue to oversee several student services areas. So as most of you know, student services is like very broad, so they kind of just throw everything in there. So some of the things that have gotten thrown under my belt are and continue to be counseling, career, engagement center, as well as our equity programs such as Men of Color, Puente, Trio, Emoja, and Transfer. So that's some of the background that I bring to this work, having had a long history both at the K through 12 high school level and also almost 10 years at the post-secondary level. Melissa?
Yep. Good afternoon. My name is Melissa Bader. I currently serve as the Interim Dean of Instruction for the Schools of Arts and Humanities and Social Behavioral Sciences at Norco College. Prior to that, I was English faculty and will return to English faculty soon, but I've also been one of the Guided Pathways leads at Norco College the entire time. And one of my main focuses in the area of instruction is working on our pathways, creating our trailheads, which we actually started at Norco College about 6 years ago, and helping Tanisha do all the good work that Tanisha does. So we are kind of the GP dynamic duo over at Norco College with a company of many, many people who help do all of our work there.
Absolutely. And thank you for those who are introducing yourselves in the chat. It's great to see a wide variety of both faculty, classified professionals, administrators. It's a pleasure to have you here. So I'm really looking forward to having some dialogue and discussion with everyone. If you haven't had a chance, continue to put your information in the chat. So we're going to get started off with the survey, just a quick little poll. We have some technical assistance being provided to us. There we go. So we kind of wanted just to start off by asking, when you think of what's happening at your institution, how many plans are there floating around on your campus that have either guided pathways and or equity? Is there one plan where it's all seamlessly put together, or are there 10 or more plans, which I just can see in the results that someone
something in the middle.
Yeah, or something in the middle. So if you could just take a moment just to let us know how many plans your institution has that has something to do with guided pathways, equity, or both. Looks like about 60% of the majority of you, around 46% of you, say somewhere between 4 to 6 plans. 31% are saying 1 to 3 plans. 15%, 7 to 9 plans. And there's one person who has 10 or more plans.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
Excellent. So it looks like 4 to 6 is the average number of plans, or the most likely number of plans that each of our institutions have. Let me close that out.
So how do you make sure that all this planning doesn't take the place of the work that you need to do? Because we all know we have limited amount of energy and time and efforts to put in. So how do we make sure that we're not just planning and not ever getting to the actual work. I know that at Norco College, we spend a lot of time planning, and we're encouraged to spend a lot of time planning, but sometimes all of that planning actually cloaks the fact that we're not getting as much done as we should. Next slide, please. So we have the same kinds of plans that you do. We have strategic goals, we have scales of adoption, we have our vision for success, we have our equity plans, we have our success factor plans, we have our technology plans. Just keep throwing them on there for us, all of the plans. I did a 30-second Google search, and these are how many I showed up with just by looking for a second. So what did we do at Norco? How do we integrate that work? How do we make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing? Well, one thing that I can say is we've got to integrate that work. We've got to make that work for multiple plans at the same time. But it's really hard to keep all those threads together and keep all those balls in the air. So one thing that we did was we did a crosswalk for clarity. And if you show the next slide shows what our crosswalk looks like. We took all of our EMP goals, our Educational Master Plan goals, and we cross-referenced every single plan that we could think of, and we actually have to add a few now. And we looked at where those outcomes, I know there's like 3 missing now, where those outcomes match up across the way. And what that does for us is it really helps to identify when we have lots of things happening in our plans that are all focused on the same thing, but it also demonstrates where our gaps are. So we really can focus our efforts on places where there are gaps. So when you think about this, you have 2 opportunities here. Do a project or a team focus at one thing that's going to hit a lot of plans and do a lot of work, or focus a team and energies on creating that gap filler, where we're going to take more energies and more places to put there. We also use technology, and this is something that I've become a devotee, and I'll show you the picture on the next slide. We use ClickUp, and ClickUp for me is a very powerful tool, because what I can do is I can take all of those plans and I can start putting those cross references in. And you can see from this slide right here, it's cross-referencing all of the EMP goals. It's cross-referencing all of the scale of adoption. It's also cross-referencing all of the success redefined characteristics. So when we adopted the success redefined characteristics of connected and directed and integrated, all those things, we started putting those on our plans as well to make sure that we're hitting all of those things every single time. This is just a small screenshot of what our ClickUp looks like, but what we can do is we can then sort by all of those things as well, so that when we're writing those reports, it's much more efficient, it's much cleaner, and it comes back out. So I just have a quick question put in the chat. What are some technology solutions that you're using at your college to help facilitate tracking of what you're doing and plans that you have in the works? Is anybody using anything like this? No, I see Henry. Thank you, Henry, for shaking your head at me.
It seems like a great tool, though. I'm actually looking it up.
Yeah.
Primarily, if I could go in, yeah, I mean, our institutional research, they are a hub for these types of things, but it's primarily driven, I don't want to speak for Jenny, through Excel, spreadsheets, pivot tables, those types of things.
So right. So thank you for bringing that up. A lot of Excel sheets out there, right? We're keeping track of our goals. And I started doing that first. But what I really love about ClickUp in particular is, one, it starts off as free if you just want to use it yourself. But if you want a team, it's $5, is that you can do that cross-referencing thing. So when you're looking at one plan, so this right here, what you're looking at is actually our scale of adoption, and we've cross-referenced it to even our district goals. So if I get asked by our district office, hey, what are you doing about this? What are you working on in these areas? I can very quickly answer that question. And that to me is timeless, right? I mean, it, as Dr. James has put in there and Tanisha put in there, it is truly a project management software, and we're not even using it to the best of its abilities. So we're using it primarily right now as a tracking software for our efforts. So we go in about once a month and we update what our efforts are. And when we talk about our project teams, you'll see that we updated that. But when we went to do our scale of adoption, we were able to go and just click it up in ClickUp, and we were able to write up our scale of adoption. I don't know, it only took us an hour or two to really kind of get what we had going and really answer the questions that we needed to answer. There is a ClickUp link in here, but I don't know that it's a live link because it's a PDF. I can be sure to put it in the chat as soon as Dr. James starts talking, and I'll stick it in there for us. So one thing I do want to put into the chat, though, is I created a document sort of like that crosswalk for everybody. And just to give you a chance to take a look at your plans and how maybe during your team time, you could look at how you are using, how are you going to crosswalk your work? And while I look at that, like that, where did I put it? Seriously. It's called Handout for GP Summit. And now I can't find it.
While you're looking for it, and you can drop it in, and we'll give a chance because we're ahead of schedule, so we'll give you a chance once you find it and to kind of walk everyone through the process. Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Excellent.
So what's my next slide? Is it you?
Yes.
It is you. Okay. So if you open up that document really quickly, what I would suggest is putting probably educational master plan goals down the side, and then the plans that you were talking about in the survey across the top, and start looking at that intersection of where those things come together. That's a really good place to start. And that's some really good, an opportunity for you and your teams to look at where you've got efforts duplicated and where you need to put additional efforts there.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Melissa.
Yes,
I think one of the things that we've learned in this process is the importance of understanding where all of the places in which all of our goals, both strategic, guided pathways, equity, all the places where they link and connect. Typically, our college is working a way where this particular group over here is working on equity, this particular group over here is working on guided pathways, and maybe a team via shared governance that's working on some of the strategic goals. But what we don't have is a cohesiveness and really leveraging campus-wide resources to move towards actually achieving those goals and closing equity gaps and scaling guided pathways. And as you know, this work requires us to do it in this way of really bringing people from all over the campus and putting them on the same boat, going in the same direction. And that can be really, really difficult because there are competing interests and there are different places where there are overlap. For example, at Norco College, equity lies in several different places. We have a diversity and equity inclusion committee. We have 2 deans who have partial ownership of equity. We have equity programs in a different place. We have an equity plan that's supposed to be college-wide, but that really maybe, a handful of people have taken ownership for. So we really started out this process about a year ago, really looking at how do we kind of connect all the dots. And so that's what I'll be focusing on. So in our equity plan, we started off by really being intentional about being race conscious. We understand that there is a lot of intersectionality for our students, but we wanted to keep race at the center. We also were intentional in its focus that it needed to be very specifically orientated to focus on the student experience and changing the student experience. It needed to be student-centered, It needed to be connected to institutional expectations. It needed to be data-driven, and we need to have process for continuous evaluation. So some of the foundation for this work was through the 5 principles for enacting equity by design. This is the work out of USC. A lot of you have heard of Estella Ben-Simone's work in this area. They are kind of world leaders in this area. And so we took those 5 principles for enacting equity by design and built them in not only to our equity plan, but also into our strategic plan. And so we see this come up in 2 different places on our campus where these principles undergird the work that we're doing. Secondly, what we did is we talked about how do we infuse guided pathways into equity. So one of the things you'll see, and our equity plan is available on our website, is that we specifically and intentionally infuse guided pathways into our equity plan. It wasn't something that was distinct and separate. We talked about guided pathways and how guided pathways supports closing the equity gap at Norco College for our students. And so we used the 4 pillars of guided pathways. We made connections between the 5 principles of enacting equity by design. And then we took it a step further by using the RP group student success factors work. I know this work has been around for a number of years. A lot of you hopefully are familiar with this work. But I think this was the piece that was really groundbreaking for us in connecting the dots between equity and guided pathways, because the 6 factors of student success is the way in which we enact guided pathways that is equity focused. So if you just take the 4 pillars of guided pathways and say, we're doing equity, you could miss the boat. There's no guarantee that you're going to close equity gaps. You may increase student success for all students, but the gaps still remain. And so the way that we are looking at how do we intentionally make sure that equity is at the center of our guided pathways work is by really looking at the 6 factors of student success. And particularly for our classified professionals, when we started getting them involved in our guided pathways work, this made sense to them. They understand now, okay, this is what guided pathways should look like for me when we are thinking about redesigning our systems. When we're thinking about, the student experience. How are we directing students? How are we helping students to get focused by keeping them on track? How are we engaging students? Understanding that different student groups are going to need different things in each of those categories. Our Black student engagement might look different from our Latinx student engagement. And so working with our equity programs, developing cultural competency around those things, these are kind of like the 3 big pieces that we built into our equity plan that has made it really robust and very comprehensive. So this is a lot of information on the screen. It's not meant for you to try to copy it down. All of this information is available online at the rpgroup.org/student support website. What the RP group did about 1.5 years, 2 years ago is they worked with Norco College to develop a crosswalk between the success factors and the guided pathways, activities, and principles. This stuff is mind-blowing. Like when you think about how you do equity and guided pathways, they have created the roadmap. Like RP Group has been on the forefront of equity work for quite some time. And this is all student voice across all of our California community colleges. And if you've ever taken the chance to get additional student voice in your campus, which we've done, our students confirm to us that this is it. Like when they say students need to be directed, focused, connected, nurtured, engaged, students unequivocally agree that this is what they need to be successful. And so sometimes we're always trying to figure out something new or find this new thing or this new piece, but a lot of times what we need to incorporate into our thinking is the student voice. And there's so many opportunities of research, really robust research that has done that. So the success factors, they provided this crosswalk, which is the middle table that you'll see about 2 years ago. In the last, I think 2 or 3 months, they actually revamped their crosswalk. We just found this out actually, and it's even more helpful now. And so this little just slice that I provided, it's specifically for Pillar 2, as is the middle table. But what it shows is at the top is it gives you the success factor. It tells you the intersection. So for example, directed is the success factor. The intersection is intentionally designing and delivering opportunities for career and transfer exploration. So you understand already that's guided pathways. And it says through college efforts such as career exploration and development, orientation, college success courses, first year experience in and out of the classroom, and career assessments. And this last category they added, which I think is so powerful that sometimes we're not always conscious and intentional of, is the student experience, right? So then students can learn more about their own interests, related educational and employment options, and the program of study that best fits. Right? Sometimes we're planning, designing, and innovative, and we haven't thought about how those efforts directly change or positively impact the student experience. And that really is the key in helping to bridge the gap between guided pathways, institutional plans, and equity. And so one of the most important things that we have learned through this process, that I think everyone knows when you talk about institutional design and campus-wide innovation, is that everyone has a role, but faculty have to lead. And this is something that the RP group have said. This is something that's built into the pillars of guided pathways, both instructional and counseling faculty, is the need to ensure that we have faculty perspective, input, and leadership in all of these areas. And so this crosswalk was really helpful for us in really connecting the pieces between guided pathways and equity. So we want to actually give all of you a little bit of time to really just pause, because we know we gave you a lot of information. Melissa's giving you a handout. If you haven't already taken the time to just reflect, and if it's too overwhelming for you to do, I mean, this is a great team project that you can do, but if you wanted to begin thinking about how do you begin to map and connect the efforts at your campus? All of us have a role to play in guided pathways and in equity. And so what opportunities exist currently to integrate and or advance equity through guided pathways at your institution? And sometimes it's through key people, sometimes it's through key groups or organizational structures. After the breakout, we're going to share about the work that how we've been able to do this and what it looks like for Norco. And it may not work for you. Every college institution has different opportunities and barriers and challenges that present themselves. But there is an opportunity at every college to connect the work of student success and equity and make those two goals and priorities intertwined. We cannot have one without the other. And so if we're going to put you into breakout groups in just a moment, and we want you to spend the first few minutes just thinking about mapping out what that would look like for you, bring those pieces together, and then have a discussion, introduce yourselves, and then have a discussion about what opportunities exist at your campus, or maybe there's already been work in regards to this at your campus to advance and integrate equity and guided pathways at your college. And we're going to give you about 10 minutes in the breakout group. I think Melissa has a comment before we break. You're mute, Melissa.
That is like the #1 phrase of the pandemic. You're on mute, which is just delightful. So I gave you two resources. One, the crosswalk, but I also uploaded a basic version of the scale of adoption, the SOAA, in ClickUp with the success redefined factors mapped to it already. So you can go, that's a public version of that. That's not our version, so you can play with that all you want. You can't break it, but it just gives you an idea of some of where we started with this work in terms of trying to find those connective places so that we could zero in and pinpoint. So that may be a topic of conversation as well if you are not wanting to do something else.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Did we lose our tech support? No, Abby. Abby,
I'm here.
Breakout groups.
Perfect. I just launched it. It should pop up on your screen to join the room. If anyone doesn't see that, just let me know.
Hey, welcome back. We'll give all the groups a minute just to transition back. Welcome back. Hey, everyone. Excellent. All righty. So thank you for those who were able to get into the group, participate, discuss. I think one of the most important things we can do in this process, particularly as we are leading GP and equity work, is to engage with our colleagues. There is, none of us are in this, on their own in a silo. There are plenty of people who are both in front and behind of you that we can learn from, that we can glean best practices from. Everything doesn't have to be trial and error. And so I know that's part of the reason why we've been able to be so successful is we have looked at what other colleges have done, what other institutions have done, and we have taken some of those best practices, whether it's practices from the leading from the middle concept, looking at other colleges like American River College, what they've done in project teams. And we didn't just recreate this stuff on our own. We looked at what was happening at colleges across the state and even the nation at times to see what are the things that we can incorporate and how can we Norcoize it, so to speak, to make it our own. And so hopefully that experience of sharing and connecting with others was helpful. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of what we did at Norco College. So we launched project teams in the, I feel like I'm in a casino where you don't know the day or the time.
It was fall. It was fall.
Yeah, in the
we
2021
in the spring and we advertised, and then it was the fall.
Yeah. So our project team model, they are small project teams. Each project team has 4 to 6 members on it. I think almost all of them have 4 or 5, actually. I don't think any of them have 6, honestly. And those project teams include 1 administrator, 1 faculty coordinator, 1 classified professional, and 1 student. And the students that we selected for this first year in launching were students involved in student government. And one of the things that's important to note is for our faculty coordinator and our student, we actually gave them dedicated time because we can as part of the union process. So for our faculty coordinators, they received reassigned time for their involvement. And for our students, we paid them to participate through, some had federal work study funds, some didn't, so we provided department funds. And so for our students, we paid them at about 5 hours a week. Our faculty coordinators, we gave them about 6 hours a week and reassign. And then we worked with our classified union and obviously senior leadership to get involvement from classified professionals and administrators. And this idea of bringing together this diverse group of people where it's a 1 ratio, right? There's no like there's 3 faculty and 1 classified or, 2 managers and 1 faculty. Everyone kind of comes with this equal footing to the project team. And we wanted to do this so everyone felt like they had ownership for and had a responsibility in contributing and having like actual tangible things that they could do and be involved in our innovative change efforts. And so that we were very intentional in this process of putting together project teams. We invited people to apply. So we didn't select people. I know sometimes it's easy to do that. You may know of people, oh, they'd be a good fit for this, or we need to tap them on the shoulder. And while we have done a lot of that successfully at times, we really wanted this project team to include change that was, and someone said it this morning in our opening keynote, change that was systemic, scalable, and sustainable. And when you are picking people to do it, it's not systemic, scalable, or sustainable. We need formal processes in place that provide for increased participation. And so what we did was we worked with each of those unions, worked with student government, we worked with CTA and Academic Senate, and we also worked with our classified Senate to roll out a process that made sense for them and that allowed us to invite people to participate and select those individuals.
Right. And it's worth noting we had an application process.
Mm-hmm.
We had an open application. People could look at what topics that we had chosen for this first year, and they could pick which topic was most appealing to them, and then they applied. And that's a difference in a lot of ways from how it's the same 9 or 10 people who end up getting tapped on the shoulder for a lot of work. I can tell you that the people who came to this work wanted to be there, were excited to be there, were excited about taking a step into something maybe they hadn't done before. And it really did go a long way towards valuing the voices in the room, because we asked them to say they wanted to participate rather than voluntolding them to participate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. one of the things we did is when it came time to giving structure to those teams, before we launched, Melissa and I went through our scale of adoption assessment for guided pathways, and we used our ClickUp tool because we had connected the dots. So we knew where the gaps were at. And that's why that crosswalk work is so important, because when we looked at the crosswalk and we could see in terms of equity, strategic goals, GP, we knew where there were gaps where we had not yet scaled, where it was not systematic, not occurring. And so that is what led us to the 5 themes that you see here. So we didn't get down to the nitty gritty for our teams of the specific activity they had to do, but we gave them a theme of how can you advance this particular area. And each of those project teams worked through a charter process, which I'll talk about in just a second. So those 5 themes were equity data, analysis and coaching, faculty advising, program to career connections, career counseling and coaching, and cultural competency. And when each of the constituent groups applied, they were provided that information so they knew what they were signing up for, and they could apply to the thing that most connected with their interest. And so those things specifically were pulled out of our scale of adoption after we did this crosswalk. Each of our project teams went through a charter process, and this is something that was really meaningful for us because sometimes we pull together teams of great people who have great ideas, great vision, but the missing piece, like someone said this morning, can be the implementation, right? And we do a lot of talking, but we never get to actually doing something that creates a change in the student experience. And so all of our project teams actually completed a project charter, and that charter gave them focus on their purpose. And this is specifically from one of our project teams, the equity data and coaching project teams. And just so you know, all of our project team charters are on our website, our Guided Pathways website. So if you want to see the template and the details, it's publicly available. But they came up with their purpose, which is focused on kind of what their overall responsibility was. They came up with identifying guiding principles and assumptions. So for the equity data and coaching team, their guiding principle is that data should reflect a racial equity lens, which is incorporated into institutional processes. They developed a charge based on that work, and they wanted to specifically create a mechanism to distribute and communicate data to the campus community that was disaggregated. Their scope was to launch a data coaching program ready to use for program review in spring of 2021, the spring that we're currently in. And they did it. Their deliverable specifically was implementation of peer data coaches for program review cycle for 2021. So in the spring semester, well, in the winter term, they launched a training program. They opened up applications for those who were interested in being peer coaches. They got individuals from all areas of the campus, faculty in all of our different schools, managers, classified professionals. They did training for these individuals, and they actually launched our first ever peer data coaches program for program review in 2021. So when we talk about advancing equity through GP, this is what it looks like for us. So we launched this very specific project team on equity, data, and coaching. And as you can see, this project team, when we look at our crosswalk, they hit strategic goals, anti-racist goals, GP related to equity goals, and our equity plan. So let me just talk a little bit about that. So when we pulled together these themes, we understood that they had multiple connection points. And so when you do this crosswalk, you then get to see exactly where your activities fit in advancing strategic goals. And so this particular data coaching project team, it is specifically connected to our educational master plan goal 3, which is to close equity gaps, and goal 8, which is to make program, student, and effectiveness data available, usable, and clear, so critical data is visible in real time. And they did that through help working with both program review committee and our assessment committee to launch a data dashboard. We also, as many colleges did, beginning last summer, we launched a racial justice task force. And the overarching goals of our racial justice task force was centered around a 10-point plan to address anti-Blackness at Norco College. One of the very specific outcomes of that work was to have disaggregated student success data so that we could reveal hidden patterns of inequity. And so in the launching of these data coaches, we now have people who are trained who can work with faculty, who can work with student services area to help them to make sense of data. Because as you know, anytime anyone is looking at data, there's always the possibility, and this is the struggle with data, that there are times when people will use the data and blame the students. And it becomes this idea of the student deficit model. And we have to help people in seeing the data from a different lens and a perspective that is anti-racist, that is equity and social justice focused. And that means taking ownership for the data, having a sense of responsibility for the data, understanding that there is something to learn about our practices because of the data. And so this was really important as part of our anti-racism work. It was also connected to equity consideration area 4 in our scale of adoption, which is college-wide disaggregation of program learning outcomes data, program retention and completion data, and the distribution of that data. And then lastly, 2 very specific outcomes related to our equity plan, which was both disaggregated data and training at both the program and course level, and culturally responsive assessment practices, which was launched through those teams. And so I just wanted to pause a moment here. I've kind of walked you through our project teams. I walked you through how we connected the dots between equity and guided pathways through those project teams, just to see if there are any questions, both if you want to throw in the chat or if you want to say out loud before I go to the next slide.
Are you satisfied with the progress that's been made so far?
With the project teams?
Yes.
Yes. And first of all, thank you, Bob, for LFM and all the training from LFM. We definitely are shamelessly borrowing a lot of that training to think about things in terms of project and middle leadership that you've taught us. So if anybody's interested, LFM is a great place to start that training. We've had 3 different LFM teams at Norco College, and we've had 3 different coaches for LFM as well. So we brought all that information back to our college and sort of implemented it on a smaller scale. Yes, we've had a lot of progress. And what's really interesting is some teams, like this equity data coaching team, had more of a sort of completed loop. Other teams, their project was just to scratch the surface. I mean, cultural competency is not going to get done in 1 year. You just need to assess. Their project was just create the assessment or find the assessment that would work for us. So to implement new ideas around that. So one thing we really wanted to say was each project team is going to have different success outcomes. They're not going to have these packages that are all wrapped up all the time. And we're okay with that. So the second year, it is worth noting that our faculty leaders are for 2 years. That's a 2-year gig that they've applied to. They could opt to reform their team and continue the work that they've done or hand it off to someone else if that seems appropriate. And we're doing some combining and we're doing some slicing and dicing based on where they're assessing themselves to be done. And that's another thing that Tanisha is going to talk about is they have to fill out an assessment at the end of the year to talk about where they think they are and what that work needs to be done. So yes, we're very, very happy with the amount of work and the effort and the, I don't want to say attitude, but I don't have a better word for that. The joyousness with which the work is getting done in this time, because you would think it would be really stressful, but there's a big shift because they want to do it. They asked to do it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that was really helpful for us is as each of those project teams navigated their work, we brought them all together. So we brought all the project teams together. We used our participation in the California Guided Pathways Project Cohort 2 and brought in people like Rob Johnstone to do, a full day, like a half day mini summit, and all the teams got to meet with him and talk about kind of where they're at in process and research and things of that nature. And we provide them with, some of the, as we get, resources available to us, we then provide those resources to our project teams. And we also meet with those faculty leads. And so we have learned a lot in this last year about how to best support them in this process. And that includes, helping them to navigate barriers, helping them to get better connected to shared governance committees and other people on campus who are doing this work. That's one of the recommendations that we have going into this next year is, this work is happening already in multiple little pockets on campus, and we're not always connected. And so that will be the next step in this process for us, is doing a better job of connecting our project teams to the committees on campus and the people on campus who are kind of touching this work, maybe not hands-on in this work, so that there is a seamlessness across the campus, because that is truly how we begin this process of moving towards systemic, sustainable, and scalable. So part of, the template for this particular presentation is the Inland Empire Desert Guided Pathway Summit asked us to provide you with a little bit of responses to some of these questions that are really important to this work. And so when we think about how this has improved the student experience, we have continuously and continue to do so. When we ask our teams for their deliverables, and now they're actually preparing their final reports where they're going to tell us kind of what happened with those deliverables, and also recommendations going forward, is that we continue to kind of, say over and over and over again that at the end of the day, it's about the student experience. And we can't stress that enough. If we've lost sight of that, then we really aren't doing the work of guided pathways and student equity. And, data has played a huge role in this process. Data is what propelled us to even begin guided pathways before it was called guided pathways at Norco College. We looked at our success data and it was atrocious, and our disaggregated data was even more embarrassing. And we said, we're not comfortable with maintaining the status quo. We have to do something innovative. We have to have a big push. We have to change and transform this college to do a better job of not just getting students in the door, but sending them out into the world prepared for living wage jobs. And if we're not doing that, we're not doing what we have the honor and pleasure of, working in community colleges. We're not doing our jobs. We have been very specific in using that equity data to be able to connect equity to strategic goals. And so we have prioritized equity in our strategic goals, and we have made equity, and we call out the word equity very specifically in our guided pathways conversations. And actually in the next academic year, we're launching a faculty equity lead and a different position as a faculty guided pathways lead, just because we understand the importance of this work, and we know that we need more people with hands-on experience and hands-on involvement in the work of both equity and guided pathways, and ensuring that it is connected. And lastly, student voice was critical in our efforts. We had students on each of our guided pathways teams. We continue to work with our students in our special programs. And so I'm really excited about even some of the workshops I was in earlier that talked about the different ways we can get qualitative student feedback. And so those will be some of the things we're looking to do, particularly as we change and launch and redesign our onboarding. We just totally revamped our onboarding process. We're revamping our career counseling process and ensuring that we include student voice in it. And so I'll leave the Q&A up for just a minute, but we have 6 minutes left, and I wanted to make sure that we gave opportunity for questions, discussions, comments, any of the above. If there's something that we didn't touch on that you had wanted to hear about, a question that we might be able to answer for you.
One thing I just noticed we forgot to mention, Tanisha, was reporting out. So one thing we had our project teams do was report out to the constituency groups on campus. And we actually split the project teams for that into job alike. So our faculty went and reported to Academic Senate, and our administrators went and presented to our Business and Facilities Planning Council and to our management team. Our students went and presented to the student government. And I think that was a really great experience for them to create their handouts and their PowerPoints, and to get up in front of everyone and present about the work that they had been doing. And it really demonstrated how much just adding in those project teams spread that work out to a lot of people around the campus. And we have had a problem in the past, and whether a problem or not, is that we intentionally did not name Guided Pathways as an initiative. We did not call it out. We didn't create a committee for it specifically. We just wanted to change the work that we were doing. And a lot of times people go, are we still doing that Guided Pathways thing? And I say, yes, we are. You just don't realize it. It's just the work that we do now. It's just the way Norco works. And that's really, I think, a great way to go, because we don't want people to think about it like an initiative. This is a change in how we do business, and it's going to touch all parts of us. And I see some of our district colleagues in the meeting, and I know that we've worked really well together with them to have the same type of attitudes. This is just the work that we need to do to make it right, to make it work for students.
Yeah. And I think just to add to that is that, we always talk about that equity is everybody's job. But we know that's, we say it and it's on paper, but it doesn't actually translate into real life. And so I think one of the things we have really been intentional about doing is involving more people in not just the conversation, but the leading of the work of equity. And so both from, classified professional to students to faculty to administrators that don't have any connection to equity. These people came in and they got to be involved in lead equity work. And so it's not just enough to involve people in the conversation. I think to give them ownership and authority and to let them take an active role in leading change is a really important distinction. And that's what we tried to do at Norco College. And I think that we did a really good job of bringing those diverse voices to the table, so to speak, so that everyone can have a say, including our students, and what our redesign looks like, and not just a handful of people behind closed doors, and everyone else hears about it when the change is being implemented. And so we were very intentional in that.
Bob.
I have a question about whether you all have had any conversations about the long haul. That is to say, you've established a set of structures and initiatives, and you have momentum. But if you look out 5 years from now, will you have the students and the faculty and the staff and the administration still focused, still pushing? Mm-hmm. It's a question that all of the institutions have. I'm wondering if you've had any discussions about the long haul. I'm not asking you for the solutions yet, but.
Yeah, so as Tanisha alluded, Norco College has been looking at completion. I think this is our 6th year. So we're a little ahead of the game, and we've already had some of those dips, right? We started off with a big, massive college-wide effort, and everybody knew what 9.8 was, which was our completion rate, and it was horrible and dismal. And then it sort of became this very narrow group of about 6 people who were strategically doing things behind the scenes and helping. And now we're OGing back out, right? We want to have that groundswell effort again with people doing the pathways projects and the equity projects. And so far, what we've found is that fermentation based on the project teams is very, very catching. People are excited about it because it's small groups of people doing great work. I think we will probably end up reorganizing again and reiterating again how we do things. Now, we've also gone through an entire college reorganization where we now have different structures to go with our new EMP. We just finished our accreditation right before the pandemic. So this is that middle time you know, that middle time where you get a lot of work done. But it's a good reminder to be heads up about it, and to think about motivation as a body that moves. And I don't think it's lost on us that we will continue to have to address that as it goes. Now, the motivation behind changing the institution for the better has not waned at all. You know, that true north for Norco is right there. We've had great leadership at all levels, and it's part of our vocabulary.
Really. I know we are at time. Thank you, Bob, for that, for both those wonderful questions you asked us. Thank you to all of you for taking the time to just hear about everything that we've been able to do. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your time at the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.